The voice of sharing, Durian ASEAN.
Good morning, ASEAN. This is Arlene reporting live from Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Today, we are going to start our news with top 10 ASEAN news, and the first one is by the Straits Times. So, Philippines, Singapore outperform other Southeast Asia stocks mix. So the story is about Singapore and Philippines. Their shares advanced on Tuesday, both hitting the highest in almost 9 months, while Indonesia markets extended its falls after recent gains. So Singapore's benchmark Straits Times Index climbed 0.41% to 3,269.34%, buoyed by gains in the property sector, while a rise in Wall Street stocks for a fifth day also supported the sentiment. So Philippines shares extended their 3-day winning streaks, climbing from 0.59% to an intraday high level since July 26, 2013. It was reported by the Reuters data. So to us, it is seen as a positive impact because property counters have been lagging behind since the index for quite a long time now. The next news is by abc.net.au. So Thailand may be on the verge of civil wars. Wow. We just reported Thailand has been in discussion for a new election, but on a different side, after nearly a decade of sometimes violent political instability, Thailand looks to enter another dangerous phase. Tomorrow, the National Constitution Court will decide whether the embattled Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra deserves more time to defend herself against charges of abuse of power. To us, regardless of the result, her supporters think that democratically elected leaders will soon be removed from office via what they say is a judicial coup. Interesting development. Hopefully, the situation in Thailand will calm down because as I said earlier, the rival protest has from supporters and opponents of Thaksin has been quite sometimes, and especially since 2006. And in these regards, it is important for Thailand to solve its own political gridlock. The next one is by BBC. So in BBC, interestingly, it's reported that Indonesia has opened an Islamic transgender school in its doors. So an Islamic transgender boarding school has been reopened in the city of Yogyakarta on Indonesia's island of Java. The school, locally known as Pesantren Waria, was the first of its kind in the country and first opened its door in 2008, but closed when its founder died last month. He has now moved to a house belonging to Shintari Ratri, a lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered activist. According to the Quran, it was said by this leader of Indonesia's Brotherhood Forum of the Faithful, Abdul Muhaimin. He said that we are not allowed to classify people based on economic, social, political, gender, or theological values. Very, very enlightening. And he also said that an organization should encourage religious tolerance. This is very interesting considering in Malaysia, LGBT are being vilified, especially by the state. And in this case with Indonesia, transgender are being received openly, and in somewhere by an Islamic school as well. So it shows that Islam has moved a step further forward in Indonesia in accepting diversity of gender and and not just gender, but also economic, social, and politics, as well as theological diversity. In this regards, we believe that it is important for other countries, especially with Brunei trying to implement its Sharia law for the first time in Southeast Asia, and also Malaysia having many vilification against minority religious sects, as also minorities in essence, looking to Indonesia for an inspiration of religion, especially the Islamic school of thought, would be something we should look forward towards. On the other hand, we have the Sun, Malaysia. And you know what? Brunei is delaying introduction of tough Islamic law. It was reported yesterday. So supposedly they should have implemented the Sharia law by yesterday, 22nd of April, as what being reported earlier. But instead, they have postponed its implementation of this tough Islamic criminal punishments that should be due begin Tuesday. And the fact is, the Hudud law, the Sharia law that will be implemented by Brunei, has been drawn condemnation from the United Nations Human Rights Office, and also rare criticism at home in social media, Twitters, Facebook, and all that. They were droves and droves of criticism by the locals, by the local Bruneians themselves, in terms of the monarchy government in implementing Sharia without even any public consultation on this. So there are no confirmed new dates anyway that was given for the start of the Sharia penalties, which will eventually include flogging, severing of limbs, and death by stoning. That's a mouthful. But and officials told Brunei media that they would begin in a very near future. So it seems like the Brunei government is pretty serious in implementing this. Sooner or later, they will implement the law itself. But anyway, currently Brunei has a dual-track legal system of civil court along with Sharia court, handling non-criminal issues like marital and inheritance. And so, anyway, the Sharia law itself is pretty, I would say, incomplete, because the Sharia cases would require an extreme high burden of proof, and judges would have a wide discretion to avoid Sharia punishment. And the punishment are very severe, as I told earlier, would include death penalty, sever of limbs, and stoning, and flogging as well. And a lot of the laws are actually laws that governs our morality and even private morality. So in this case, I think from the Malaysian side, we also have some criticism in trying to say that, hey, if Brunei is doing that, it may create a domino effect to Malaysia. But at the same time, like, we can't help to just look and see. We can't do anything from here. But I hope that more and more awareness among the people would create more enlightenment in terms of why the Sharia law might not be a very, I would say, progressive law in terms of the modern society of today. So the next news it was reported by New York Times. Wu Win-tin, he's a writer jailed by Myanmar junta. He died 2 days earlier, and he is actually a very prominent figure in Myanmar's political history. He was a journalist, author, poet who became a leading opponent of the military rulers of Myanmar when he was imprisoned and tortured for 19 years. Wow, that's a long time. And he died on Monday in Yangon, which is formerly known as Rangoon, and sources differ on whether he was 84 or 85. So the reports in the local news media said that his kidney and other organs had failed. Mr. Win Tin joined 8 other political activists to form the National League for Democracy in 1998. And in this case, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991 for her human rights advocacy, the party won a landslide victory in national election in 1990. U Win Tin has a very long history in Myanmar politics, and he is well respected by not just the older generation during that time, but also the younger generation of Myanmar youth. And one of the key area why they are really interested in exploring in their own history, because Myanmar itself is transiting towards the era of open door policy, and a lot of news media in Myanmar and also the people there openly convey their condolences towards U Win Tin. And U Win Tin had not been married, but he had left one daughter who he adopted quite a couple of decades ago. And in his memoir, What's That? A Human Hell, his imprisonment began in 1989 was harrowing. In fact, he was placed in a tiny cell in what has been a dog kennel and given no bedding at all. He was fed sparingly and given inadequate medical care. An operation for a strangulation hernia performed in a dirty prison hospital cell, resulting in the loss of testicle. Oh. He lost most of his teeth in the beatings and was then denied dentures. He had 2 heart attacks in prison. Much of the time, he was in solitary confinement and he was deprived of sleep. He was even denied visit from the Red Cross, and new charges was often added to his sentence. So that was him in one of the most notorious prisons in Myanmar. But Mr. Win Tin, he's a man of deep humility, and he continued to eat sparingly, having one meal early in the day and a bit of fruits in the evening. In essence, I think he's a very principled man, because he also said that I don't want to be a burden on anyone. And in 1978, the newspaper he was editing, the Hantawadi Daily, was shut down for satirizing the local authorities, and even military officials suspected that he had advised Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi to begin her civil disobedience campaign in 1998. Interesting. During his imprisonment, Mr. Aung San Suu Kyi also said that his torturer wished that to force him to admit he was my advisor on political tactics. In other words, that he was my puppet master. So that was the notorious, not just the notorious prison, but the notorious officials during the military rule itself. But anyway, after his surprise release, Mr. Win Tin wrote a weekly column and broadcast a weekly radio show. Using satire to mock the government. He founded a political journal he had conceived in jail with other political prisoners. So that was the history of and lives of U Win Tin. We also convey our condolences to him and his family. The next news was reported by The Guardian UK. So Singapore needs to address its treatment of migrant workers. Singapore has been faced with low wages. Singapore migrant workers has been faced with low wages and poor working conditions, and they are beginning to get restless. last year itself, a fierce riot broke up in the suburb of Little India, which was the infamous Little India riot after the Indian worker died in a road accident. The riot was as violent as it was rare. The last riot took place probably in 1969. That was a long time ago, and provoked intense scrutiny into how migrant workers are treated in the country. So, in this case, the riot was not caused solely by migrant working conditions. Other factors include alcohol and anger at the way the police responded in the early stage. That was one of the theories given by the Singapore government. Anyway, regardless of the cause of the riot, said by Jolovan Wam of Home, an organization that supports migrant workers in Singapore, it is good opportunity for us to reflect and rethink our attitude, policies, and laws which affect migrant workers. To us, the similar stories would probably be seen in Malaysia as well. I think the working conditions and the working contracts of migrant workers is definitely biased against them. They are not receiving fair and decent wages and workload. In fact, they work in very dangerous industry. For example, producing chemicals and other manufacturing-based industry. So, in that essence, migrant workers are definitely at a very higher risk in terms of their health and their livelihood, and their living conditions, and they are being placed in places that are very cramped and dirty, and this is not a very good working conditions for the migrant workers. For a first world country like Singapore, we should expect more or better from them, being considered a high income nation, but the people there are not receiving a treatment of what a high income nation would be. Anyway, the next news is by Free Malaysia today. So Malaysians was urged to protest Obama's visit. So politicians associated with the parliamentary opposition has called for a public protest against the US President Barack Obama visit to Malaysia, saying it may result in more pressure being piled on Putrajaya to sign the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, or for short TPPA. So, this was said by leaders from Parti Sosialis Malaysia and Pakatan Rakyat. They told that Obama was coming to seek progress on the TPPA and will make it hard for Prime Minister Najib Tun Razak not to sign the trade pact. So, in this regard, PSM Treasurer A. Siva Rajan said in a press release that the US might even team up with Japan to pressure Malaysia. Wow. So, and I think Japan joined the TPPA quite later on compared to Malaysia, but it seems like the TPPA will be materialized soon. Malaysia should only sign a trade agreement that favors Malaysia, not one that compromises our market access and hold government to ransom. That was mainly the climate that we hear and see among Malaysians at large, and especially from the opposition side. But the fact is, I think the biggest problem is the lack of transparency among between the government and the rest of Malaysia on the agreement itself. How much of the agreement will affect not just the domestic market, but also affect the livelihood of Malaysians in general. So I think the key word here the government should listen is they should provide more transparency, more public consultation, and it's not because the Trans-Pacific partnership agreement is something that everyone is against of. It's because we are not sure whether it would benefit Malaysia in the long run. So for the government itself, this is something that I think they probably would have, should have done it earlier in terms of laying it out open to the public. But anyway, the visit of the US President Barack Obama will be the first to Malaysia. In fact, it will be the first US president to visit Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. The next news, Australian network was reported that Vietnam says it will not host 2019 Asia Games. Wow. So few weeks earlier, we reported that Vietnam is still not sure whether to host the Asia Games or not. That is because they have spent a lot in terms of the previous game, especially the SEA Games back a couple of years ago. And this has created wastage in terms of the taxpayers' money. For this news itself, Vietnam says it had decided against hosting the 2019 Asian Games due to financial reasons and is exploring procedures to withdraw from staging the region's largest sporting event. So, a lack of experience in hosting large sporting event and difficulties in the country's socio-economic situation were cited as reason. Vietnam will also apply for the hosting of ASEAN at an appropriate time, stated by the statements. So officials said hosting the 80th ASEAN game could cost around $150 million and would require the construction of new sporting stadiums and an athletes village. The problem is, it's not about the constructing all these new infrastructures and building. I think the main problem is it really valuable? Is it really something that would benefit Vietnam in the long run? I think they have made a very wise decision and decided against hosting it because the socio-economic situation in Vietnam is definitely not doing good. And in terms of promoting Vietnam as a country for tourism is definitely on the right track because Vietnam has done a lot of economic reforms and attracting a lot of FDI businesses and also tourists, and having a large-scale sports game like the Asian Games would not necessarily boost Vietnam's image or branding in that sense. And besides that, I think when it comes to taxpayers' money, it should be spent wisely and it should be channeled to things that is more urgent to the Vietnam society. And one of it is about their livelihood, their education, and also healthcare. And these are more urgent and important areas that Vietnam government could have spent on. So to us, it is a wise move for Vietnam to withdraw from the largest sporting event, which is the Asian Games 2019. So the last news of today is reported by The Star. It is quite a light news. We just want to say that the ex-Miss Malaysia divorce case against her tycoon hubby sent back to KL Family Court. So the divorce case between a former Miss Malaysia and her estranged tycoon husband has been sent back to Kuala Lumpur Family Court by the Court of Appeal here. So Justice David Wong ordered that the case of Pauline Chai Siu Pin, the Miss Malaysia International 1969, and Tan Sri Koo Kay Ping to go back to trial as there were too many disputed facts in the appeal. So last December, High Court Judge Noraini Abdul Rahman had ruled that Koo could file his divorce petition in Malaysia, and that means the question whether the divorce would be heard in Malaysia or England needs to be settled again. Okay, so the background of this divorce case has been between two countries, in Malaysia and also in England. So in this case, we just hope for things to get better between the couple of Miss Malaysia and her estranged tycoon husband. That's all of for the news of today. Thank you for listening to Durian ASEAN, and we will continue shortly with our blast from the grassroots